Hello everybody, welcome back. Today for Psych of Emotion we're going to talk about emotion and relationships. So this will be a video in several parts as we produce it. And again, we travel the globe. I assume we're home in Columbus here doing the OHIO thing. It just still amazes me that people are compelled to do this and do it over and over again. I have to make an admission, I'm getting kind of used to doing this, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, that being at home and doing this. I hope that after summer this is the last time we do it, but boy, that sure is kind of out of our hands. We're just going to find out how the pandemic plays out. I mean, that's all we can do. I have no certainty about fall semester. And people who do, I think, are kind of engaging in wishful thinking rather than empirical kind of analysis. So let's talk about emotion and relationships. Obviously, some of you chose to do this as your paper topic. So here we go. We'll cover some of the aspects surrounding your paper topic, but not directly related to your paper topic necessarily. And for the rest of the class, so let's just do the emotion and relationship thing. I want to start with this set of studies. It assumes that we have affiliation needs, that we have needs in general to be with other people, to somehow seek contact and affiliate. And during the pandemic, you can see where this might be an interesting situation, that people's affiliation needs might necessarily be challenged. If you're a hugger, this is probably a bad time for you, because hugging people is probably not the best course of action. But in managing the affiliation needs, and let's say this too, that when we talk affiliation needs, this is going to be determined individually. Some people have high affiliation needs, some people low, most somewhere in the middle. The question is, or the research to be looked at here states that we're pretty good at, in fact, managing our affiliation needs. And in this particular study, it's a cool study. It goes back to the day of pagers, and you know a pager is kind of a ridiculous piece of interim technology in between landlines and cell phones. The pager, when I first got mine through work at Boise Cascade, they gave me this pager once I got promoted up to a supervisory level, or at least assistant supervisory level. And they say, here's your pager, and I'm going, oh, I'm so cool now, I've arrived. But the whole idea with the pager is if anything went wrong at the mill, one weekend out of 6, right, then I was on call, and the pager would go off, deet, 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 deet. And it's kind of silly because it displays a number, and then I have to go find a telephone and call that number, right? Cell phones didn't really exist in any great number at this point in time. So it was an interim measure. Interim technology. Now, how is it used within an experimental context? Well, O'Connor and Rosenblood were using it. They would give research participants a pager, and it was set to go off about every hour approximately on the hour, give or take. You know, it might be an hour and 10 minutes, it might be 50 minutes, kind of a little flexibility built into that. And the pager would go off, and the pager was to remind the participant to now open up their notebook and write the answer to 2 questions. And it was always the same 2 questions, so every time it went off, let's say 14, 15 times a day, for a week's time, you're just going to open the book up, the pager's the reminder, you open the book up and it says, hey, are you with anybody? And you write down yes or no. And then the second question is, do you want to be with anybody? Yes or no. And the idea was that we can look at a person's current state, and then we can look at their desired state, and the next time the pager goes off, we can see if their current state matches their previously responded to desired state. And what they found was about 66% of the time, people were in the state that they said they would desire at the next time. So take this as evidence. About 2/3 of the time, people are satisfactorily managing their affiliation needs. That's pretty cool. And I bring it up too because it's an interesting study. Obviously, with cell phone technology now, this study is a slam dunk to do, because the telephone will do everything that the pager will do. And if it's a smartphone, then we can actually record the answers to those questions, and makes data collection and data analysis that much easier. So all that is available. Now, as people began to explore the idea of affiliation, that is, being with others, and how it relates to emotion, a bunch of mini theories were kind of being developed. Schachter, and we remember Schachter from the misattribution paradigm, the injections in norepinephrine, etc. Schachter found that when people were put into a fear state, they preferred to affiliate. So they were saying, affiliation is driven by fear, at least in some cases. And this was an interesting experiment. What they did is, and it's one of those experiments where the experiment starts before the participant thinks the experiment starts. So you go to the office, you walk in, and they say, hey, glad to see you're here. Let's go ahead and sign in. And then you're going to have to sit down here in the waiting room until we call you. The waiting room is actually the experimental location, and what they do is when you sign the release, half the releases say you're going to have to endure painful electrical shocks as part of the experiment. The other half is the control condition where no shocks are mentioned, and it doesn't matter because they're not going to occur in any event. What they're going to do though is watch the extent to which you chat up the person you're sitting with. This is a confederate who you believe is another experimental participant waiting to participate. The idea was the people who are afraid, made to be afraid because of the shocks, chatted up to the participant to a greater degree than those who are in the control condition. So we can see that fear can drive affiliation to kind of share the fear and maybe reduce the fear in that context. And at the same time, we know how researchers go. Everyone's trying to publish their own articles, advance their own ideas. And here's another little mini theory that affiliation and embarrassment have a different relationship. In this case, if we're embarrassed, we'd probably choose not to affiliate. We would try to avoid others, at least on an extremely short-term basis. Sarhoff, you've probably not heard of, is the second author on this. Zimbardo, I'll bet you've probably heard of, famous for the Stanford prison experiment. Something you guys probably don't know about Zimbardo, at least most early in his career, Zimbardo was building himself up as an expert on shyness, and he literally wrote the book on shyness. But how did this experiment work? Well, you come into the laboratory and you're assigned to interact with other people, right, and have the choice to interact with people. And what they do for the experimental condition is they put a pacifier, they put a binky in their mouth. And they find that people who have a binky in their mouth don't want to interact or affiliate with others, and that would be the embarrassment factor. So obviously this is pre-rave by a good extent, and that's even an old reference by now. Occasionally then, when you see all these competing ideas come along, at some point someone will conduct a meta-analysis or short of that, just take a look at a variety of experiments. And Rolf did this, and what he said is, it's a simple explanation, and it will help us predict how affiliation interacts with other emotions. That is, what is the expected utility of the interaction? So if I'm embarrassed, right, what's going to happen as a function of affiliation? Probably increase my embarrassment. If I'm afraid, then it might assuage my fear. So we can make predictions based on Rolf's idea that we understand how the interaction will play out, how it will affect us emotionally, and we make our choices then based on the utility of those choices. So he kind of took an overview and gives us a tremendous kind of predictive stance. Let's move on then. Let's talk about the misattribution. Now, when we talked Schachter and Singer, we talked about people who were injected with epinephrine and they misattribute the results of the injection to the context of the situation, being happy or angry, depending on what the confederate was doing and the lack of knowledge about what the epinephrine was doing. Remember, when people were told this is an epinephrine injection and will cause you arousal, then they didn't show the emotional effects. Now, there's other ways that misattribution can occur, and it's a common term then in social psychology. Let's face it, those of us who, you wrote the paper on Sternberg and you look at passionate love, then you look at passionate love as a state of arousal. It's a new relationship, the heat's there, the passion is there, and so when we meet someone new and we find ourselves falling for this person, we become attracted, notice the physiological effects. Our palm might sweat, our tongue might tie, we might feel our heartbeat faster. These are all, of course, anxiety-related physiological states as well as passion-related states. So the big question is, would it be possible to, let's say, prime someone with an anxiety-producing stimulus and then have them misattribute that to a target they encounter as some kind of passionate attraction, that is love? And Dutton and Aaron did this study. It's a big study. It's a field study, which is cool because we don't have many field studies out there. Most of the studies are done in the laboratory, maybe up to 90% of social psychological studies. So you take an old rickety bridge, and this is just my example. This wasn't the bridge they used, but the bridge is nasty, and most people would be scared to death to try and have to walk across this, especially if they have a fear of heights. And what they do then is they take a lovely experimental assistant, and in this case I'm going to borrow Vanna White just here for a little bit because she's traded on her loveliness for a lot of years now. And what they do is they place the experimental assistant at the end of the bridge, and our participants now walk along the bridge, and notice they're not participants, these are just guys out there in the world walking across this bridge. And when they get to the end of the bridge, what happens? She stands there and says, "Hey, I'm a research assistant and we're conducting experiments. Here's a card with my phone number. Please call me if you're interested in participating." The idea is walking across this bridge increases the heart rate, creates a physiological arousal. Will they, in fact, mistake that arousal from the bridge to an attraction to this lovely young woman? Now, the other condition, the comparison condition, is you take a very robust, stable bridge, right? And this was done in Washington State. So this is a strong bridge, and many people, while they might be afraid of walking across the shaky bridge, will walk across the stable bridge with really no physiological response. And now, for the other half of the time, they move the experimental assistant to the end of this bridge, the stable bridge, and she does the same thing, hands out the card, same line, and all they're going to do, can you guess the dependent measure? What's going to be measured in this situation? Yeah, you're exactly right. What's going to be measured is the number of phone calls she receives, and true to the hypothesis, confirming the hypothesis, we see she gets more calls in the rickety bridge condition. Further evidence for misattribution of arousal. So this passionate love then might contain the thrill of it all, right? And passionate love then requires this heightened state of physiological arousal that is kind of by definition a component of passion. And the belief that the arousal was triggered by the beloved person. So again, we have this kind of cognitive aspect to it that connects it. So it's the appraisal process that we've already discussed. Boy, I'm feeling aroused. Wow. To what do I want to attribute my arousal? Oh my God, here's this target of my attraction. They must be causing me the arousal. So that's the connection that is made. The belief that it was triggered by the person. But sometimes, you know, we can misattribute physiological arousal to passionate love, as in the Dutton and Aaron bridge study. The process overall was coined, the term was coined by Zillman way back in the day, and he called this excitation transfer. And this is similar to some Freudian concepts as well. In this place, the Freudian concept would be displacement. But excitation transfer is, I'm stimulated, I'm excited by one source, one stimuli, and I transfer that excitement, that arousal to another stimuli. Now, a couple other points here. Attractiveness. How does it feel to see a perfect 10? And a caveat here that we have to do in social psychology often now is I'm going to talk here about this study, and this study was done really kind of in the binary fashion. That is, heterosexual men and heterosexual women comprise the participants in this study. When we get to gay or lesbian folks, I'm not sure how the study would pan out, right? And this is why a lot of studies can now be replicated going non-binary, and I think it'd be just useful and interesting in social psychology to do so. So with that caveat that we're talking heterosexual men and heterosexual women, what do we do? How does it feel to see a perfect 10? So they bring participants in and they randomly assign them to conditions as we're familiar with. And the 4 conditions, you could be shown same-sex photos of attractive people, or same-sex photos of average people, or opposite-sex photos of average people, and opposite-sex photos of attractive people. And then a mood measure is employed. Please just, check the scale as to the level of the positivity or negativity of your mood, right? Or in this case, the low and high aspects of a positive mood. What happens? Well, when we see same-sex photos and they're attractive photos, we actually see mood depression or mood suppression. That is people's mood kind of tanks. If they see average photos, then there's really kind of just this baseline mood, which compares nicely to the opposite sex photos of average photos. But now, so where the action is, and that's a term we use in the study, is the bars that differ, and that's in the attractive photo conditions. And what we see is same-sex attractive photos tend to suppress mood, opposite-sex attractive photos tend to enhance mood. Very simple finding and certainly predictable. It's not counterintuitive in the least. So, in talking about beauty, let's talk about the benefits and the cost of beauty. And I'm picking on Joan Rivers here a little bit. You can see the young Joan Rivers and the older Joan Rivers. And Joan Rivers, made her living critiquing people in Hollywood and critiquing their appearance, their dress, etc. as a part of that. Imagine making your living as an attractive young woman critiquing the attractiveness of others. Part of the deal is what happens as you age and your attractiveness begins to fade. Well, we know in Hollywood that it often drives a trip to the plastic surgeon or multiple trips to the plastic surgeon, and over time that can have its effects. So the costs and benefits of being beauty, right off the bat, we know that being good looking doesn't guarantee health, happiness, or high self-esteem. So none of those are necessarily associated in that regard. Attributional problems with being good looking. Is the attention or praise that you receive because of your talent, or is it due to your good looks? And imagine for attractive people who get hired for a job, the big question is, did they get hired on the basis of their attractiveness, or did they get hired on the basis of their qualifications? And it becomes ambiguous, and doubt enters the question there. So having to maintain this one appearance might be the source of anxiety. If you traded on your appearance and you can't really believe that maybe you've gotten positions because of your skills but only your appearance, then in the future you may be driven to, in fact, continue to attempt to enhance your appearance, which might lead to Botox or plastic surgery, kind of a severe fitness regimen to keep the body in shape, and all of these. The loss of one's attractiveness may be the source of sadness-related emotions. And this is something that I think most of us have to face. I look at myself in the mirror at age 62, and where I thought maybe I was better looking as I'm younger. Every year that goes by, I look in that mirror and go, dude, you're starting to show your age, and it's not necessarily a pleasant situation. So I'm going to break here right now. We're about 18 minutes into this, and a natural break point, and then we'll come back to theories of love.